What is up, everybody? Isaac here with Civil Engineering Academy. Thanks for joining us on another Civil Engineering Academy podcast. Today, I am thrilled to introduce a special guest. His name is Brandon Dashwood. He is a professional engineer. He's a senior engineer, structural engineer at an engineering firm called Paradigm in San Francisco. He holds a bachelor's and a master's degree in structural engineering from the University of California, Davis, and he specializes in dynamics, modeling, SAP 2000, seismic retrofits, all kinds of good stuff that deals with structural engineering design. So, he is trying to earn his SE. It's a milestone that every structural engineer typically wants to get for growth in their career. And so in this episode, we talk about how he balances taking the SE exam. As many know, SE exams are tough. There's 4 parts to these exams. They've recently switched to being CBT, and Brandon took this as a CBT exam, was able to pass 3 out of the 4 sections, and has struggled to get over that 4th one. I'm positive that he will, but we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of the SE exam going CBT. So we're going to talk about how he's managed to deal with these setbacks that he's had, all the positives that he's had with the CBT exam, the negatives that go with this being a CBT exam. So whether you're preparing for your SE exam or any other exam, there's some really good advice that Brandon gives that are some great practical takeaways. So I want to dive into that. Let's figure out what the SE is all about. We're going to unpack it. Many people in their circle of friends don't even know what the SE is, or they don't know anybody that's taking it. The pass rates are super low. People are just kind of waiting to see if the NCES can iron out all the bugs on this thing before they go take it. But he has dived in. Brandon is awesome. He's one of the first ones to get in there and do this stuff. And so let's find out what the SE is all about, and we can do that together. That's what this episode's all about. I'm excited to share it with you, and I can't wait till you check it out. Leave comments. Let us know what you think about this episode, and we'll make sure we do more of these in the future. But without further ado, let's get Brandon on and let's talk about all things SE. See you in there. All right, we are rocking and rolling. Brandon, thanks for joining me today on Civil Engineering Academy podcast. Appreciate you doing this. I know I'm doing this on the road, on the run. My wife has me all over the place, but thanks for doing this with me today.
No worries, no problem.
We just squeeze this in when we can.
Of course.
I'm excited to talk to you. I know you are going through the SE experience. Many people want the SE. They're hesitant to go do it. They don't know what they're going to get into. And hopefully we can unpack that today. But I always like to start these, though. Like, tell us your own background. Like, what do you do? Where are you working? What are you working on? Why are you getting your SE?
Yeah, sure. So I grew up in the Bay Area, work here in San Francisco. I work for Paradigm Structural Engineers, got my bachelor's and master's at UC Davis. Pretty quickly after that, got my PE. Paradigm does a lot of, unique structures, all the different material types, very high seismic. We've done some unique things like base isolation, fluid viscous dampers, BRBs, so some pretty cutting edge lateral stuff. So I've got to experience a lot of structural engineering has to offer here. And it's definitely promoted and encouraged to get your SD here. It's not necessarily required, but I think because we're dealing with so much of the structural engineering world, we're not kind of pigeonholed to maybe just doing one-story residential design or something. We're kind of seeing all the different material types and all the different loading schemes. It kind of makes sense to the next step is to kind of get that SE, which obviously has to do with all of those material types and loading mechanisms. So right as I was eligible to get the SE, I wanted to start to do that. Unfortunately, it was right at the time that it transitioned to CBT. So I've been going through that process ever since. Earlier on, you mentioned that you don't know many people going through the SE. I don't either, because no one really wants to go through the SE right now. But that's kind of the process that I've taken through my career to getting up to the SE now.
Okay. Well, maybe we can unpack this a little bit, but some states require the SE for certain design categories and building types. Could you touch on that a little bit? Because I think there's some confusion on folks that just want to get their PE in structural and those that want to get the SE.
Yeah, definitely. So there's very few actual restrictions as an engineer where SE is required. I don't know all of them, but I think there's like 2 states. I think it's Hawaii might be one where you need an SE to do hospitals or things over 4-story, I believe. LA is another weird instance where an SE is required, I think, to do hospitals. And then there are some states like Illinois, which actually don't even have the PE offered. They only have the SE. So if you want to get licensed in Illinois or Chicago, you'd have to get the SE and you just skip the PE. The vast majority, 98% of the United States, everywhere else, if you have the PE, you can do all types of engineering, all engineering. You can stamp drawings. There's no need to have the SE. The SE is kind of like a way of showing clientele that, you really do know structural engineering beyond just what the PE provides. But from a legality standpoint, the SE is not really required in a lot of different areas.
Interesting. And then maybe touch upon this before we kind of dive into the exam experience. But what's the value then of getting that SC? Are you seeing that there is career bumps, there's pay raises? Like, what is the value for people that may be considering it?
Yeah. So from a company perspective, I think a lot of the time when you try to get jobs, you list how many SEs you have on staff, how many PEs you have on staff, and that's a huge benefit for the client to kind of look at a company and say, oh, they really have a lot of people on staff that know what they're doing. So from a company standpoint, they want more people on staff to have the SE and the PE. So that usually does come with some sort of incentive, whether that be the position you want to go to requires an SE at your company, or a pay bump or a pay raise or a bonus could be associated with the SE too. So there's career progression standpoint that you would want the SE. And then for me, I think a bigger part of it, because Paradigm doesn't they do like a bump and all that stuff, but you don't need the SE necessarily to move up. So a big part for me was just kind of my own personal perseverance with wanting to kind of prove that I do know quite a bit of structural engineering and can pass a test as difficult as the SE. So part of it to me was kind of just a challenge that I wanted to see through. And now I might regret that challenge a bit, but for me, it was, half personal and obviously half it's great for the company and for career progression.
Okay, that's awesome. So let's dive into the exam then. Could you paint a picture of, for those that are not familiar with taking the SE exam, like
Sure.
what is it? And even if you could touch on like what changed, because it's the last exam that went CBT. So why don't you kind of hit that?
Okay, so this one might be a long-winded answer, but I think it is good to have a background. So the way the SE used to be, no longer, when it used to be paper and pencil, it was offered twice a year. So every 6 months, you would drive to a convention center usually, and there'd be a bunch of volunteers that would administer the test. You'd have a huge table. It would be a 2-day test. So you'd have 8 hours the first day and 8 hours the second day. You were able to bring anything you wanted. So all code books, cabbed, written in, examples, design guides, anything you wanted. People used to bring in wheelbarrows full of books and references and anything they could think of to help them on the tests. The test itself was, the first day was vertical or gravity systems, and the second day is lateral systems. And they test you on all 4 material types, so steel, concrete, wood, and masonry. And then they split the test into gravity and lateral. So the first day, what used to be the morning section, the first 4 hours would be all multiple choice. It would be 40 questions, and they're a little bit more breadth in nature. So they were heavy on analysis and they were tricky, but you tended to not have to do lines and lines of math to get the answer. You just had to really critically think through your answer, and then it would be multiple choice A, B, C, or D. That was the first 4 hours for both days. So the first morning section was multiple choice for gravity and for lateral. The second half of the day was, you were given a booklet, and it would have 4 scenarios in that booklet, 1 for each material type. So concrete, masonry, steel, wood. And it would be gravity would be the first day, the afternoon, and then lateral, same thing, afternoon, but from a lateral perspective. And in this case, they would give you a real life problem. So it'd be a concrete building. They'd give you the full diagrams, everything, and then it would have a series of questions, usually building on each other. So it would say, at this retaining wall, and it would clearly show the retaining wall, design the retaining wall for the loads that are shown in the diagram, which might be soil interaction or whatever the case may be. And you would have to do pages and pages of math and proof and drawing details that how to design that. How do you take down the loads? How do you do the capacities? And it would have a series of questions, usually 4 to 5 for the scenario. So it'd be first the retaining wall, then it would talk about the slab on the retaining wall, then it might talk about the shear wall above that, but it would all kind of be tied in. But it would reset you. So if you didn't really know how to do the retaining wall, it would say, for the second problem, okay, assuming the retaining wall was this thick and with this rebar, now do this. So it would reset you so you didn't just have compounding issues throughout the test. And most importantly, I think it's all open book, open note, open everything, and also graded on paper. So they know if you put the wrong F prime C down, whoops, everyone does that, we're timed. They see that. They know, okay, your process is correct, but you put the wrong F prime C. You didn't have the negative here, whatever the case may be, you have a calculator here, error here. But they see your work, which is what engineering is about. And then you'd go through the 4 problems and you'd have 4 hours to do that afternoon section. The way the SE used to be is you would have to pass the day totally. So if you want to pass the vertical section, you can pass that separate from the lateral section, but you have to pass the multiple choice and the depth section of the same section to pass that. So you could pass gravity by passing multiple choice in the depth section and fail lateral. And then from then on, you would not need to take any of the vertical tests and you could just focus on the lateral test. So that is how it used to be. When it changed to CBT, almost everything about that process changed. So what I maybe want to point out is some of the things that changed that really would affect how a test taker would take it. So how the CBT works now, and I'll go through how the differences affect a test taker in a second, is it's now a 4-day test, but the test is still split into multiple choice and depth for gravity, and then multiple choice and depth for lateral, but they've increased the time to, I think it's like 5 hours, 5.5 hours for the multiple choice, and it's 55 questions, and it is administered as its own test. And then same thing for gravity, 55 questions, 5.5 hours, and same type of questions, the exact same thing. So the multiple choice was pretty much just taken over. It's the same thing, same type of questions, but there's 15 more questions, and I'll explain that in a second. And the depth is now administered as its own test. It's a 5.5 hour test. And there's 5 scenarios, not 4. And each scenario has 12 questions. So not 3 to 4 like it used to be, it's 12. So big differences just off the bat is probably the biggest benefit is you can take the 2 breadth portions at any time during the year now. So you fail it, you can take it again 2 months from then, instead of how it used to be where you'd have to wait that 6 months. You can now kind of take it a little bit more rapidly if you need to, for the breadth sections only, for the multiple choice. You can also pass each individual section separately. So it used to be you had to pass multiple choice and depth of a certain section to pass the test. Now I can pass the multiple choice for vertical and I'll never have to do that again. Pass the lateral depths, I never have to do that again. So those are the 2 major benefits. And I honestly, personally, the only benefits, because practically everything else is a major downside. And I'll get to that. So number 1, you have no references. You can't bring in anything. So little things like earmarking your steel manual just so you know, oh, the green tab is where I go for the alignment charts. You don't get to do that. The way it is on the test now is you have one screen in front of you. It's not dual screen, it's one screen. You can only have one window open at a time. So if you're reading the problem statement, that's what you have open. If you want to open up the code, you open up one chapter of the code at a time. They're literally, you have to exit out of the chapter and open up a new chapter to get a new chapter. And it's the only thing you can be seen. So imagine doing like a snow load and then designing a wood beam. You have to understand the problem, open up 716, go to the right section for like load combinations, close that, open up the snow section, read that, close that, open up the NDS, read all that, close it, and then go back to the test, all within what they say is a 6-minute solution. So that's extremely difficult to do, having no notes whatsoever. So on the multiple choice, what's also hilarious is instead of 40 questions, it's 55. The reason it's 55 is because they have added what they call test questions, which are predetermined by NCES that are not graded. They automatically negate those from the thing. They're just in to help their test bank. So you're basically taking a 55 question test, but only 40 or 45 of them are actually graded, and you don't know which ones they are. And it comes out to about 6 minutes per problem. So for the most part, the multiple choice was about the same, except for you're doing a lot more problems and you have no ability to read your own references. There's no example problems. There's no design guides. It's just the code and you with no notes. So you basically better know exactly where you're going in the code and then be able to know what you're doing in the code. Because if you have to actually read the code, you're probably already out of time. But the multiple choice, for the most part, was essentially the same with the exception of no notes, no references, etc., and more problems. So your brain is, weakening by the end of the 50th problem. You're really starting to blur together. But you would find in the CBT that the rates of passing those multiple choice were a bit lower than the historic rates, which for the SE are about 40% is a pretty average number for the pass rate. Some people think that's like, oh, so the test isn't that hard. That's like a lot of people are passing. But you also have to think about the fact that the people taking the SE are people already very prepared and very disciplined about, they're going beyond the PE, they're into the SE, they're studying a lot. So the pool of people that are taking this test are usually very qualified. And only 40% of those folks were able to pass. So that gives you a little bit of a frame of reference that it is a very difficult test. The multiple choice was showing 35% pass rate or so. So it was pretty similar because it is multiple choice. Hopefully you're able to kind of get through it in the same way. Not too much changed with the exception of the references. It's the depth section that has vastly changed. So like I said, it's 5 scenarios instead of 4. The 5th scenario is a test subject thing again. They don't grade it. They don't tell you which one it is, but just one of the full scenarios you do is just absolutely thrown out the window and you don't know. Again, a lot of brain power goes into that it doesn't affect your grade. Second is it's 12 questions, not 4, and they're fill in the blank answer. So you do a page of math and then you type in what your answer is. And if you don't get the answer right, and again, they don't see your work at all. So if that answer is not correct, it's just wrong. And it even says in the thing, no partial credit. I mean, how could they give partial credit? They can't see what you're doing. So someone like me who has spent 250 to 300 hours studying for this test goes in and I hit my thumb on the calculator wrong. They don't know the difference between me taking the test and getting that wrong answer, having all the methodology right, all the math right, but oops, I hit a 0 where I didn't mean to. And someone who just came in and said, I don't have enough time for this. The answer's 4. Oh, well, they don't know the difference between those two candidates at all. Let alone the fact that the diagrams and all this stuff that you're looking at are all on one screen. They're extremely poorly done. Unfortunately, I don't want to just badmouth NCES, but they are just terribly done. Dimensions are on an elevation over here, but then called out as a different thing over here. And grid lines are shown up here. And you're trying to navigate through all this stuff. And if you do the math, if you take 12 questions per scenario, 5 scenarios with 5.5 hours, it equates to 5 minutes per problem that you have on the depth section. That means you have less time per depth problem, which is objectively harder than you did on the multiple choice, which makes no sense. Like who are making these rules? It doesn't. So you have to not only navigate this whole scenario, but you have to be faster than you were on the multiple choice portion of the test, which it just doesn't feel like any actual engineer sat down and took this test and thought, this makes sense. It is almost the opposite of what engineering feels like. And I think that's what's most frustrating is you study so much, you know this material so well, like the back of your hand. I mean, I've memorized the code because I can't write notes. So I feel like I'm a better engineer, but then you go into the test and you feel like it's the test that is causing you not to be able to pass, which for full disclosure, the first time I took the CBT, I passed 3 of the 4 the first time, which is great. And the pass rate was 9%. So I was like, I am jazzed that I did that. And now I've taken the vertical depth, which I failed the first time, 3 times because again, I don't even know if how did I do a calculator error wrong? I feel like I know what I'm doing. It's confusing and all this other stuff because it's not a great test, but you don't know what you did wrong. And you really don't know if it's because I didn't know the material or it's because I made a random error. And the pass rate has stayed 11, 12%. It's not improved once. So
how do they give you the results? How do they give you the results after the exam?
Yeah, good question. So what they do is they send you a diagnostic. If you fail, if you pass, it's just green pass. You don't get any diagnostic. If you fail, it will show you the 4 different scenarios. Again, remember there were 5, but they lost one. You don't know which one. So it shows masonry, steel, wood, concrete. And it just shows them. And then it shows a line. It's 1 out of 15 is their rubric, which is arbitrary. There aren't 15 questions. It just says 1 out of 15. And then it shows a line where the average on that scenario where the average test taker who passed got. So it might say like an 8 was the average passer on steel. And it will show the line got a 6. So the last time I failed, I passed all of them except for on the wood one, I was one tick below that average and I failed the entire thing. I don't know why. Who knows what I got wrong on the wood one? I don't even know what wood scenario it was because there were two of them and they dropped one of them. So yeah, it's just the diagnostic does not help you much because it's like, I don't know, did I make a calculator error or did I not know what I was doing? And usually you leave the test going like, oh, I need to brush up on T-beams for concrete. And that's never happened to me. I know the concepts that they're throwing at me. So it has to be these small calculator errors. You're rushing, you have 5 minutes per problem. And one big thing, and this will be the last thing of just this SE thing, is the assumptions. So when you first start, the old SD would have very clear assumptions about everything, extremely clear. Ignore snowdrift, ignore, the wind load here, only be looking at earthquake. This test does not have that. It would tell you to take a beam and design the beam, but they wouldn't give you the loads on the beam. And you'd have to come up with like what 2x6 would work or what like 2x8 or whatever the case may be. And so your problem would be you have to do the full load takedown. But when you're not given whether do you do live load reduction? Do you do snowdrift? Do you do, like all these assumptions in my head? I'm sitting there like, well, I guess I have to do all of this stuff. And I know that's going to take me 30 minutes. So I have to assume they're assuming I'm not going to do some of this stuff. But how do you know? And so that's where you can get answers wrong. So bad at claiming their assumptions.
Man, it just sounds like a very brutal exam. I'm impressed that you got 3 out of the 4 knocked out in one shot.
Yeah.
It's super frustrating that last one seems to be like you don't even know.
Yeah.
And you're saying it's fill in the blank?
Yes.
Like, so I guess I'm confused how they display results, give results to you based on where averages are. I guess I don't know how they're grading this thing. It's just right or wrong.
No one does. And what I think is happening now, I would hope, is that they're doing sort of stats-based thing where maybe they're running scenarios where like, hey, what if they did the F prime C different? What would that answer be? And maybe there's some sort of partial. I'm completely guessing because when they did the practice test, let's put it this way, when they did the practice test, they sent out right when CBT happened, they said, here's our new practice test. First of all, it had errors everywhere. I asked for a refund. I literally graded it and said, this is all wrong. Like everything here is wrong. So how you're giving us this practice test is ridiculous. Second, when they did do the answers, they would literally show like, okay, the answer is the shear is 25 kips. And it would literally say in the practice test, if you said 24.9 or 25.1, you would get the right answer. So I'm like, wow, you have to be within that much and it will say it's right or wrong and there's no partial credit. So when it's giving you that diagnostic, how I think they're doing it is there are 12 problems. They say they're going to, not only are they removing a full scenario, but they also remove 2 of the problems. So really everything is out of 10, even though you're doing 12 problems. Then I don't know how they get a 15 scale, but I think they just calculate the ones you get right and then normalize that via stats, probably some sort of huge bell curve or something, and plot that on a 1 through 15 scale. And that's where you land. But there's no partial credit. They can't give you partial credit because you're not showing work.
What fixes would you have for the NCES?
Yeah, sure. First and foremost, I think is it shouldn't be CBT. I think that's ship has sailed, but engineering itself is not fill in the blank. Certainly not the depth section. They're asking us to design buildings in the depth section, and you're asking us to fill in the blank. That's kind of a ridiculous notion. And if you are going to do CBT, I would say the 2 things are, or maybe 3 things are this. Add a second monitor. We need to be able to have that. Everyone has second monitors at work for good reason. You have kind of your problem statement on one and your code on the other, or whatever you need to do. Diagrams here while looking at your code. Going back and forth and flipping between them is just, it confuses you and it adds to the time that you certainly don't have with 5 minutes per problem. You should be able to bring in references. I don't really see any need for any engineer to purely be designing based off code alone. Obviously, everyone thinks you probably should be able to, but the code can be confusing. It can be, hard to do, especially in a timely manner. Having bookmarks, having little notes to yourself about, having a certain unit in PSI versus KSI. These are all things that allow your brain to be focused on other things without having to, finally you get to the right equation and then, oh, now I need to remember, like, shoot, was this in feet or inches? Now I got to go back to and again, you're on the computer, so you got to close that chapter, go back to the, like, where everything's defined at the beginning, open that up, go to it. Okay, it's in PSI, close, go back to the other chapter, etc. So having notes to yourself, having references is a very real life thing in engineering. There really shouldn't be a reason you're tested without having that. And then third, and probably the biggest ones, because I don't think those other two are ever going to happen, meaning I don't think they're going to do second monitor because they have to have a deal with the testing agencies, and I don't think they're going to do that. And B, I don't think they're going to allow references in because, again, I think for security and other things, that's probably why they don't have it. There's not enough room in these testing agencies. You're in a little tiny cubicle. Like, there's just not enough room to bring in a wheelbarrow full of stuff. So I don't think those are going to happen. And I also think they're going to stay CBT. So I don't think going back to pen and paper is going to happen either. So the real one I would say is you need to have real engineers sit down and take the test and give feedback before you administer this to the public. It should have never been to the public in the state that I was at. It's very clear with the pass rates and the pushback that the entire industry is showing NCS that it was not ready. And these are people's livelihoods that you're putting them through. So when I mean put engineers through the test, and it's very clear where you need to have better assumptions. You need to clearly tell me what you want me to do, what you want me to ignore, because in engineering, as you know, as an engineer, there's so many assumptions with everything you do. Do I take the shear at D/2 away on a wood beam because you're allowed to, but a lot of people don't because it's just faster to do V/2 or P/2 or whatever. But I have to know. So now on the test, I'm like, I guess I'm going to do similar triangles to get D/2 because it's saying the minimum design, which would be D/2. It's little things like that you need, ignore out of plane axial from what could be wind on this beam. Like, if you don't tell me that, I have to factor that in. Otherwise, I'm guessing on what your assumptions are not. So I think the biggest advice I would give is you need real engineers, PEs and SEs, to take your tests, give feedback on where are the pain points, because there's a lot of them. I mean, I wish I could have been hired after I've taken this test. I could tell them exactly, like, hey, sit down with me. I'll show you what does not work for this test. And it's very obvious. So who are you testing these questions with? Because it's really obvious. So it's kind of confusing, like it's like, what is your quality control on this?
I have a few follow-up questions for you.
Yeah.
One is the PE has its own handbook. I don't assume, do they give you that, or do you have an SE handbook? Or nothing, like code standards?
So there is a handbook given by NCES. It's a PDF. It's the type of thing where it'll give you like interaction equations for like columns, concrete columns, like the PM diagrams. It'll give you stuff like that. Gives you some basic like geometry stuff. It gives you the beam diagrams that are in like the AASC manual. So simple stuff like that. It's okay. But yeah, they do give you a reference handbook is what they call it, but it's pretty mediocre. Yeah.
Gotcha. Well, it sounds brutal. I mean, I've also heard obviously negative things about the whole exam experience, and so I'm glad to get you on here and paint that picture for people if they're curious about heading this route. So ideally, it gets better over time. I'm sure they had that paper-based one probably dialed into a T, but
they did, yeah.
CBT one just seems like a nightmare. So
yeah, and I have taken the depth now 3 times. It's marginally getting better. I see more assumptions getting put in there. The diagrams are getting a little bit better. It's so marginal, and you can tell in the pass rates it haven't changed much. It's 9%, 11%, 10%. So like there's improvements, but it's not changing the needle enough.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of the other frustration is like people are now spending hours and hundreds of hours doing this, and you need to change the needle. Like
it's a waste of time and money.
Yeah.
How much is this exam experience?
I don't want to even say. I've spent a lot. It's about, I think, $350 for each module. So I said there were 4 tests. I passed the first 3, so that's $350 each. Plus I did that. Now I'm spending $350 every time to take this 4th one.
You got to have a good company that reimburses you.
That's right. No, honestly, not to toot Paradigm's horn or anything, but I have been very adamant about complaining about this test, and they are definitely seeing that, hey, it is not in a great space right now, and they've been very supportive. So that has been nice, that, work is not a pressure on top of the test itself, which is nice.
That's great. I'm curious, like, what keeps you, is the motivation for you to keep going because you've already done 3 of the 4 and let's just try to knock it out? Because I could see being in the boat of like, I'm just gonna wait until this thing is better because this is horrible.
And that's everyone I know. When you mentioned at the beginning, you don't know many people taking it. Either do I. I'm the only one who's taking it right now. We had 2 or 3 people in the office take it with me. They unfortunately didn't pass them, and have stopped, because why do it? Unfortunately, I feel like passed 3. And at this point, I feel so close to the finish line. I want the SE so bad that it's kind of like taking a test right after you're done with the class. I feel like it's all there. I don't work on masonry nearly as much as I work on steel in real life. So like having that knowledge ready, the code, I know everything that's going on. I want to kind of keep that momentum until I get the, pass it all and get the SE. Because if I take a 2-year break or something and then have to reopen up all the books and do that again,
I get it.
yeah.
Keep the momentum
I do want to pause until it's better. That's what my head says, and then I'm too stubborn.
Dang. Well, I'm rooting for you, man. I'm excited for you. I think you can do this. I think it sounds just brutal, so I applaud you for even making it this far. But
Yeah.
I think I just want to thank you for coming on and sharing all these tips, what the exam experience is like, because many people don't even know. And I think this will be very enlightening to them. So, any last words of wisdom or anything else about the SC you would share?
I mean, I guess my sincere hope, and I think the industry itself has this hope too, is I don't want this to put a damper on our industry. I know that it's difficult, and a lot of people are kind of, it's daunting, especially in this. It was daunting before. It's even more daunting now with everything everyone's hearing, but I don't want that to cause people to not want to come into this industry or work to get their PE and SE. I think it's a really good thing to do. It makes you a really good engineer. Hopefully by the time some of these listeners are thinking about doing it, it's fixed. That's what we can all hope for. But right now it's in the state that it is, and there's nothing we can do about this.
Sounds good. Well, Brandon, thank you for doing this. If anybody had more questions about the exam experience or kind of wanted to follow in your footsteps, is there a way for them to contact you that they could reach out?
Sure. Yeah. You can just email my work email, which is B as in Brandon Dashwood, DASHWOOD at paradigmse.com. Just email it there, and I'm happy to respond to any questions.
Perfect. Thanks for jumping on, Brandon. We'll talk to you later.
Of course. All right. Thank you so much. See ya.
See ya.